Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into something a little unusual, stone fruit. But not just any fruit. We're heading back to 19th century Australia where the sun is hot, the animals are suspiciously poisonous, and someone, somewhere, decided that what the colonies really needed was a giant banana, built out of concrete. Picture this, it's late evening in Queensland. The sky is streaked in pink and orange, and the cicadas are making that soothing static hum in the trees. A cart rumbles by on a dirt road, pulled by a tired horse. A young settler leans back against a fence post, chewing on a stalk of grass, looking out over the newly planted banana rows that shimmer silver in the moonlight. He's got no idea that his great-grandchildren will one day take selfies in front of an enormous concrete banana just down the road. And you're just a time-traveling dreamer tonight, tagging along as we wander through banana groves, old railway towns, and marketing brainstorms that got a little too ambitious. You probably once survived the mosquitoes, honestly. But don't worry, we're here for a story, not a sunburn. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and what time it is where you are. I always love seeing how far this little sleepy storytelling reaches. What? Now, close your eyes, just halfway if you're still peeking, and drift into the dusty world of colonial ambition and fruity monuments. We begin in the tropics. Queensland in the mid to late 1800s was something of a paradox. It was wild and overgrown in all directions, with vast coastlines and rich volcanic soil just begging for cultivation. But European settlers were still learning, often the hard way, what grew well in this upside-down continent, and what most definitely didn't. You could plant apples and get nothing. Why, try wheat, and the soil would laugh at you. But tropical fruits, now those were starting to look promising. Bananas arrived in Australia in a piecemeal way, sneaking in aboard ships and brought lovingly, and sometimes illegally, by immigrants and sailors from places like Fiji, Samoa, and even China. Most historians agree that the earliest bananas were planted in the northern regions of Queensland around the 1850s and I-60s. They liked the heat, they liked the humidity, and frankly, they didn't mind the snakes. Farmers in towns like Coffs Harbour and Tully started carving out little banana empires. It wasn't fast work. Bananas weren't like corn. You couldn't just throw seeds in the ground and hope for the best. They needed care, shade, continued moisture, and someone with the patience to watch a green little plant slowly produce its weird bendy yellow fruit. But here's where it gets kind of charming. People started falling in love with bananas, not just as food, but as symbols. See, in a tough colonial world full of floods, droughts, and snake-infested outhouses, bananas were cheerful. They were yellow. They curved like smiles. They didn't remind anyone of home, which was a good thing. And they came to represent something rather profound in their own fruity way. Tropical abundance. A promise that yes, the Australian soil could grow something exotic and sweet, and a little ridiculous. Of course, no good thing exists without a little competition. Soon, neighboring towns started noticing each other's banana output. Who had more hectares under cultivation? Who had the fastest rail route tort? Who had the juiciest, least bruised bananas? And somewhere, in all that agricultural one-upmanship, a strange idea started to take root. What if a town could be known not just for its bananas, but for one really big banana? It didn't happen overnight. There were meetings, arguments, probably a few mugs of strong bush tea, slammed down on wooden tables, as men in waistcoats debated building materials. Some said wood, others said iron. But a small and stubborn group pushed for something bold. concrete. Yelling, new, unwine. A fruit that would last forever. But that's a story for a bit later on. For now, you're still in a Queensland field, watching the stars come out one by one over the banana groves. Somewhere, a dog barks half-heartedly. The warm wind stirs the leaves with a sound like slow applause. And in a nearby shack, a farmer lights a kerosene lamp and flips open his ledger, carefully recording how many bananas he picked today. Tomorrow, he'll pick more. Maybe even plant a few new rows. And he'll wonder, quietly, how far these bananas might go. Whether they might someday feed not just a town, but a whole colony. Or attract tourists. Or stand 50 feet tall and confuse future generations. But that's for another night. Or maybe the next section. For now, let the banana leaves rustle softly in your dreams and follow the scent of ripening fruit into deeper sleep. Now that you've got your boots gently sunk into the soft Queensland soil, let's step back just a little further. Because to understand how bananas manage to take root, figuratively and literally, you'll need to know a bit more about the climate, the colonists, and of course, the convicts. Australia in the 19th century wasn't exactly a unified, cheerful land of opportunity. It was a patchwork of colonies, some originally established as penal settlements, others later formed for reasons of gold, land, or economic leverage. Queensland itself had only separated from New South Wales in 1859, and the new colony was eager to prove it could hold its own. The climate, however, had other plans. Hot, wet summers. Sudden storms. Unforgiving droughts. And a whole host of creatures that stung, bit, or slithered. Farming, for early settlers, was an elaborate negotiation with nature. You might get lucky and harvest a good season. Or you might wake up one morning to find your crops flooded, your sheep missing, and your boots full of ants. The early economy of the region was driven by sugar cane, cattle, and somewhat amusingly, attempts at growing European-style produce that mostly failed. Bananas, for a while, weren't the first pick. They were considered somewhat exotic, maybe even frivolous. The kind of fruit you'd find hanging over a tropical breakfast buffet, not lining the shelves of respectable markets. But slowly, that perception began to shift. Chinese immigrants, many of whom had arrived during the gold rushes, began establishing market gardens throughout Queensland. They brought with them knowledge of tropical agriculture, irrigation techniques, and, importantly, the idea that bananas were more than just a novelty. They were staple crops, adaptable, and potentially profitable. Add to that the efforts of South Sea Islander laborers, often brought to Australia under deeply controversial and exploitative circumstances, and suddenly banana cultivation began to boom. These workers, some of whom came voluntarily, and others who were forcibly recruited in a practice known as blackbirding, were deeply familiar with tropical farming methods. Their labor, rarely acknowledged in the glossy tourist pamphlets that would come later, was essential in planting and harvesting Australia's earliest banana crops. Meanwhile, British settlers, forever nostalgic for hedgerows and apple orchards, had to face an uncomfortable truth. If they wanted their colonies to thrive, they'd have to adapt. That meant accepting new foods, new growing seasons, and yes, a fruit that didn't even come in a nice symmetrical shape. Bananas were odd, but they worked. They needed no pollination, they grew quickly, and once established, they could be harvested several times a year. Banana plants also didn't require expensive infrastructure, just patience, water, and a willingness to let the plants go a little wild. In towns like Innisfail, Tully, and Coffs Harbour, the banana plantations began to sprawl. Rows and rows of the plants curved along hillsides and valleys. Oh, yes. From a distance, it all looked rather magical. Long swaying leaves, soft humidity in the air, and that sweet green fragrance of ripening fruit. But for the people working those fields, it was grueling labor. Early banana farming wasn't romantic. It meant cutting back dense jungle, building drainage systems by hand, and carrying heavy bunches down slippery slopes in the rain. There were leeches. Now, there were injuries. There were days when nothing ripened, and others when everything ripened at once, and there weren't enough carts to carry the haul. Still, progress was made. Banana varieties were selected for taste, yield, and shelf life. Wooden packing crates were built to hold the bunches, and trains carried them down to coastal ports. Local children made pocket money helping with harvests, and families measured their fortunes by how many banana stands they could keep healthy through the season. And somewhere in all this muddy, sweaty, mosquito-infested work, bananas began to earn respect. They weren't just fruit anymore. They were an identity. By the late 1800s, towns had begun to realize that banana country could become more than just farmland. It could become a reputation, something to lure visitors, something to put them on the map. And in Australia, where people tend to take pride in things that are oversized, slightly odd and proudly local, that reputation was just one step away from monument status. But before we jump ahead to the grand plans and concrete dreams, let's linger just a little longer in the 19th century fields. You're walking through rows of banana plants under a hazy afternoon sun. The leaves are taller than your head and rustle in the breeze with a dry paper sound. A fruit bat flaps lazily overhead. In the distance, you hear a cowbell. Someone calls out in a mix of Cantonese and English, probably joking about the weather. And for a moment, everything smells like damp earth and ripening sweetness. You crouch down and touch the soil. It's warm and a little gritty, full of life. A few ants scurry by, oblivious to your presence. Back then, nobody knew a big banana would one day rise over the hills. But you can almost feel the story building under your feet. The bananas are growing. The workers are learning. And the towns are watching. Soon, the race for banana fame will begin. You wouldn't think a banana could be competitive. But by the early 20th century, in Australia, it absolutely was. As the banana industry took off, so too did regional rivalries. Queensland and New South Wales each wanted to claim banana superiority, not just in production, but in banana quality, banana innovation, banana branding. Yes, branding bananas became a thing. This was the era of crate labels, farmer co-ops, banana queens, and fruit shows. You may not think fruit can be political, but in banana country, every bunch came with a side of ambition. Now, try to picture this. It's the 1920s. The world is reeling from World War I, and Australia is trying to redefine its place in the global economy. Imported goods are expensive. There's a fresh push to support local agriculture, and bananas are beginning to take on the aura of a truly Australian fruit, even if they'd only been growing in the country for a few decades. In Coffs Harbour, a once sleepy coastal town in northern New South Wales, banana growers were starting to organize. The steep hills and rich volcanic soil made for ideal growing conditions, and the humid climate meant that bananas could be harvested year-round. By 1926, Coffs Harbour was shipping out thousands of crates each week, rapidly positioning itself as the country's banana capital. But Queensland wasn't about to let that title go uncontested. Towns like Tully and Innisfail were expanding their own plantations and pushing into export markets. Tully even installed one of the earliest regional banana packaging sheds, where fruit was washed, sorted, and boxed with assembly line efficiency. So what's a banana farming town to do when it wants the world to know it's the top banana? It builds something big, something unforgettable. Not quite yet. But the seed was planted. Pun fully intended. Civic pride was swelling. Tourism, too, was growing in the 1930s as more Australians could afford cars and coastal vacations. That meant a new kind of opportunity. Roadside attractions. These were the golden years of kitsch. Across the United States, businesses were erecting giant hot dogs, enormous cowboy hats, and houses shaped like dinosaurs to lure motorists. Australia, ever pragmatic but never humorless, started catching on. It began with tea rooms. Then came wildlife parks, oversized pineapples and signs claiming the world's best pie. And somewhere in that mix, a few banana growers started joking, only half-jokingly, about building a massive banana right beside the highway. But before concrete could be poured, something else needed to happen. Bananas needed a face, a name, Mel, one darlings, a sense of flair. Gone! That's when the Banana Queen competition started. Yes, actual young women would compete in pageants to be crowned the Banana Queen of a given town, region, or festival. These weren't casual affairs. There were parades, speeches, costumes themed around tropical bounty, and even floats festooned with, what else? Bananas? The events were equal parts agricultural fair and social spectacle. While they may seem comically quaint today, at the time they played a major role in raising the profile of local banana growers and, by extension, the towns themselves. Meanwhile, banana growers began organizing into cooperative marketing boards. These helped set quality standards and allowed for bulk selling to urban grocers. It also meant that bananas began showing up in new places, not just at markets, but on menus, in cookbooks, and in public school lunches. And that's where things get a little odd. Because bananas, originally dismissed as strange, foreign, and hard to spell, suddenly became aspirational. Housewives were encouraged to make banana custard. Bananas were promoted as baby food. Ads declared them a cure for nervous indigestion. Doctors recommended bananas for energy. Athletes swore by them. Children were told they were brain food. All of this meant one thing for banana towns: more attention. More tourism. More reasons to build something unforgettable. Coffs Harbour was especially motivated. Despite its booming plantations, the town had little in the way of destinations. There were beautiful beaches, of course, and charming hills, but no headline attraction. It needed a landmark. Something to say? This is banana country, and we are not kidding around. In small town council meetings and local Rotary clubs, the idea of a giant banana became less of a joke and more of a civic plan. It was discussed, debated, and eventually budgeted. Meanwhile, the architecture of roadside attractions was evolving. These weren't just billboards anymore. They were immersive. Visitors wanted to walk through something, pose with it, tell friends they'd been inside the banana. Plans were sketched. Prototypes built. Banana curves debated. So, local artists were consulted. Does it look ripe enough? They asked. And finally, in the early 1960s, though that's a story for a few chapters from now, the big banana began to rise. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Right now, you're standing on the dusty roadside of pre-war Australia. A fruit truck rattles past, bananas stacked high in wooden crates. Kids wave from the back. A dog chases after a stray wheel. Off in the hills, a plantation worker is chopping back some overgrowth with a curved blade. In the distance, someone's setting up a sign. It reads, "Fresh bananas, 2 shillings a bunch, ask for Gwen." And you can just tell, this banana business is going somewhere big. Let's take a breath, because now we're about to meet the man who actually did it. The man who turned a running joke about a giant banana into literal tons of concrete, and a legacy still standing decades later. His name was John Landy, and he wasn't a showman, or an architect, or even a city official. He was a banana farmer. A real one, with dirt under his nails, sunburned forearms, and a deep love of fruit that could ripen even in a heat wave. By the early 1960s, Landy was running a small banana plantation on the northern edge of Coffs Harbour. It wasn't fancy, but it was productive. His family had been growing bananas there for years, and with tourism increasing along the Pacific Highway, Landy had a thought. What if people stopped not just for bananas, but because of bananas? He had seen how motorists reacted to small fruit stalls. They'd pull over, stretch their legs, buy a few bunches, chat for a minute, and move on. But what if there was something they couldn't ignore? Sure. Something so ridiculous, so wonderfully big, they had to stop? So, Landy leaned into the joke. "Let's build a banana," he reportedly said. "A big one." People laughed. Then they paused. Then, over a few cups of tea and some scribbled napkin drawings, they stopped laughing and started calculating. How big? Where would it go? Would it be solid? Could you walk through it? Could there be a gift shop inside? The answers began to take shape. The banana would stand at the edge of Landy's plantation, just off the highway. It would be hollow. Visitors could walk through it on a little educational tour, learning about how bananas were grown. It would end, naturally, at a shop selling banana-themed trinkets, snacks, and soft serve. And most importantly, it would be enormous. Unmissable. Bright yellow. Mince. A beacon of fruity optimism. Now, building something like this in 1964 wasn't as simple as calling a theme park contractor. Landy had to think creatively. Now, he enlisted the help of local engineer Alan Chapman and a young architectural draftsman named Alan Goff. Neither had designed a banana before, but that didn't stop them. They studied the curves of real bananas, took measurements of several bunches, and created scale models. Goff reportedly used chicken wire and papier-mâché to model the original shape. It wasn't glamorous, but it got the job done. Once the shape was finalized, a concrete mold was prepared, and the big banana began to rise, slowly, section by section. The final product was 13 meters long and 5 meters high. That's about 42 feet long and 16 feet tall for those outside the metric world. It was painted a ripe yellow with slightly green tips and a shadowed underside for realism. Realism, of course, being a relative term when you're standing inside a 16-foot banana. Locals were skeptical at first. Some called it an eyesore. Others worried about banana fatigue, a real concern apparently. But as the structure neared completion, the tide began to turn. Word spread quickly. New mountains. What haven't you? Have you seen the banana? People asked. Is it really that big? Oh, it's bigger than you think. On December 22nd, 1964, the big banana officially opened to the public. The first visitors paid a small fee to walk through its belly and read informational panels about banana growing, harvesting, and shipping. There were photos, tools, and exhibits. And of course, at the end, banana-flavored milkshakes. The opening was modest, but the impact was immediate. Cars slowed. Tourists turned in. Children squealed. Reporters came. Headlines were written. He sold. Radio hosts chuckled. And just like that, Coffs Harbour had its landmark. There was something wonderfully absurd about it. And yet, somehow, it worked. Because it wasn't just a banana. It was a beacon of rural optimism. A roadside hug. A fruity punchline with heart. John Landy didn't know it at the time, but he had kicked off a national trend. The big banana would become the first of Australia's many big things, a uniquely Australian form of roadside attraction. Over the next few decades, the country would sprout giant pineapples, giant prawns, giant rams, giant koalas, even a giant potato that looks suspiciously like a large rock. But it all began with the banana. This banana dot. And while others may have been flashier or larger, none could match the original's quiet charm. Back on the plantation, Landy's modest fruit stand transformed into a full visitor center. Banana-themed postcards flew off the shelves. Tour buses added the big banana to their itineraries. Couples posed under its arch. Kids had birthday parties in the shade of its curve. It even made television. But it's important to remember, at the center of all this hoopla was a man who just wanted people to stop and learn about his fruit. In a way, Landy succeeded beyond his wildest dreams. The big banana didn't just teach people about agriculture. It gave them something to remember, something to smile about, something silly and sincere in equal measure. And even today, when you drive along the Pacific Highway and see that unmistakable yellow arc rising over the trees, you know you've arrived. You've made it to banana country. Go! As the 1960s came to a close, the big banana was no longer just a giant novelty. It had become a cornerstone of local identity, a place people could rely on to pause, stretch their legs, and enjoy a piece of Australian history. But it wasn't all sunshine and banana milkshakes. In the early days, the big banana wasn't just a symbol of success. It was a battleground for civic control, tourism dynamics, and even economic stability. Landy's initial investment, as daring as it was, had been a gamble. It wasn't just about the structure itself. It was about securing long-term revenue streams. People like to talk about taking a picture with the big banana, but Landy knew that wasn't enough. He needed to build an economy around it, and that meant more than just selling bananas. Enter the gift shop. Inside the big banana, visitors could buy every banana-themed souvenir imaginable. Postcards, t-shirts, novelty caps, banana plush toys. It wasn't just about bananas anymore. It was about branding. Landy had turned his creation into a thriving tourist attraction. More visitors meant more money for the local economy. And more money meant more infrastructure, better roads, new cafes, and accommodations to house all those coming to see the oversized fruit. As the 1970s unfolded, the big banana's fame only grew. It wasn't just a stop for tourists. It had become a key part of the local agricultural story. The Coffs Harbour region, with its fertile soil and ideal climate, was firmly cementing itself as a major player in Australian banana production, and the big banana was the symbolic heart of that industry. And yet, amid the expanding tourist infrastructure, the big banana faced an ongoing struggle. As the global tourism industry grew, so did competition. The boom of the 1960s and 1970s wasn't enough to guarantee forever success. New attractions were sprouting up across the country, and the question became, how do you keep something like the big banana relevant? The answer was simple: keep evolving, and don't forget the community. In the 1980s, the big banana underwent its first major renovation. The initial hollow concrete structure was updated to include a larger space inside, more exhibits, more places for visitors to explore, more banana-related educational content. It wasn't just about the fruit anymore. Now, it was about understanding the broader context of banana farming, the history, the ecology, and the agricultural challenges. Local schools and families were encouraged to visit, providing a constant stream of educational traffic. The banana's once humble role as a roadside attraction was being transformed into something deeper. It was no longer a whimsical joke, but a site of learning. And that's where the big banana stood, apart from other roadside big things. It wasn't just a photo op. It was part of a greater conversation about Australia's rural economy and agriculture. But even with all these upgrades, there were challenges. Coffs Harbour, like many coastal regions, was undergoing rapid urbanization. The surrounding area was no longer just a sleepy village where farmers tended to bananas. It was becoming a modern hub for tourists and developers. With that growth came rising land values, and suddenly, the Big Banana wasn't just in the middle of the farm fields anymore. It was smack in the middle of what would become a bustling modern tourist town. As the local population grew, and more attention was paid to the infrastructure around it, discussions started about whether the Big Banana still had a place in the town's changing identity. Was it still relevant? Or was it becoming a relic of a past era? More and more businesses were starting to offer sleek, polished tourism experiences, complete with high-tech museums and interactive attractions. Was the Big Banana, for all its charming kitsch, falling behind the times? Despite these concerns, the Big Banana remained a constant. The question now was how it could remain a cornerstone of Coffs Harbour's tourism while accommodating the modern demands of a more sophisticated public. Over the next few decades, the answer came in the form of the 1990s renovations and the addition of new attractions, which included a water park and go-kart track. The area surrounding the Big Banana began to feel less like an outdated tourist stop and more like an entertainment center, aimed at drawing in new generations while maintaining its nostalgic charm. The 2000s arrived with an even bolder vision. The once simple banana attraction began to sprawl. New services and activities, everything from food courts to art installations, were incorporated to keep people entertained once they had seen the banana and snapped their photos. It wasn't just about one giant piece of fruit, it was about creating a full-day experience. But perhaps one of the most important features that helped the Big Banana stay relevant over time was the ongoing relationship with the community. Every renovation, every new activity or attraction added to the site was deeply tied to the local economy. People living in Coffs Harbour weren't just passive observers, they were stakeholders in the success of the Big Banana. The evolution of the Big Banana was a reflection of the town itself, a blending of nostalgia, innovation, and deep local pride. And so, as decades passed, the Big Banana stood resilient, even as it grew and changed. The banana, once a punchline, had become a symbol not just of the fruit industry, but of the strength of small-town Australia in the face of global change. But there was still one more twist in the story. The surprising future of the Big Banana that you wouldn't have guessed. As the 21st century dawned, the Big Banana had become more than just a quirky roadside attraction. It had transformed into a full-fledged Australian icon, a symbol of both rural charm and modern tourism. Yet, for all its success and transformation, the true test of its endurance was still to come. It wasn't just about growing, expanding, or adding more attractions. It was about the future. And that future arrived in the early 2000s, when a new wave of tourism and a shift in consumer culture began to shape the way people experienced landmarks. The world was becoming more connected, and as travel became more affordable and accessible, people were starting to demand more from their experiences. No longer content with simply snapping a photo and moving on, tourists wanted unique, Instagram-worthy experiences, and businesses were beginning to tailor their offerings to meet these changing desires. The question that hung over the Big Banana was, could it keep up with the times? Could this giant banana maintain its cultural relevance while adapting to a new generation of tech-savvy, experience-driven visitors? The answer, surprisingly, was yes, but not without a little reinvention. By 2007, after decades of minor tweaks and improvements, the owners of the Big Banana began a new bold chapter in its history. They decided that if the banana was going to survive as a major tourist attraction, it had to embrace the very thing that had helped other large-scale roadside attractions thrive in the digital age: interactivity. So, the Big Banana underwent its most ambitious renovation yet. The team behind the landmark expanded it into a modern entertainment complex, designed to cater to a broad range of visitors, including young families, adventure seekers, and international tourists. Gone were the days when the banana was just a static object. It was now a multi-sensory experience, a place where visitors could get involved in the narrative, not just witness it from a distance. The first major addition was the Big Banana Fun Park, which included water slides, go-kart tracks, and an array of kid-friendly activities. But what truly captured the spirit of this transformation was the addition of an interactive banana world, where guests could learn about the banana's journey from seedling to harvest, in a way that felt less like a lecture and more like an immersive journey. Guests could even experience simulated banana farming, planting virtual bananas, and harvesting them in an augmented reality setting. Yet, despite all these flashy additions, the core of the Big Banana's charm remained its authenticity. It wasn't just a theme park. It wasn't just a tourist trap. It was still that quirky giant fruit that everyone loved, but now, it had become something far more complex. A place where learning, fun, and nostalgia blended seamlessly. One of the most significant additions was the banana-themed cafe, which served up banana-flavored everything. Banana bread, banana milkshakes, and yes, even banana pizza. It might sound silly, but the cafe became an instant hit. Not just with tourists, but with locals, who were rediscovering the Big Banana as an integral part of their town's identity. The cafe offered a sense of community. It wasn't just for tourists. It was for everyone. And in a particularly clever twist, the Big Banana even embraced the power of digital marketing. With the rise of social media platforms like Instagram and Facebook, the Big Banana found a new way to engage visitors by becoming the ultimate backdrop for a selfie. The banana's bright yellow facade, already iconic, now served as the perfect Instagrammable setting for thousands of visitors who were eager to share their experience with their friends and followers. But this wasn't just a superficial marketing ploy, it was part of a larger strategy to keep the Big Banana in the cultural conversation. The giant fruit had long been a part of Australian pop culture, but now, thanks to social media, it had become a viral sensation once again. People weren't just visiting for a photo op. They were visiting because they wanted to be part of the cultural moment. It was through these modern tweaks, combined with the Big Banana's steadfast commitment to its agricultural roots, that the attraction found new relevance in an ever-evolving tourism landscape. But even with all this progress, the Big Banana faced another challenge: the physical structure itself. Decades of wear and tear had taken their toll on the banana's concrete shell, and the question loomed: could it last another 50 years? Or would the legacy of the Big Banana eventually be swallowed up by time and development? In the mid-2010s, the decision was made to undertake a major preservation effort. The banana, which had once seemed like an indestructible novelty, was carefully refurbished. The concrete was reinforced, the paint was freshened up, and the internal structures were revamped. But even as the Big Banana underwent these restorations, one thing remained unchanged: its status as a symbol of Australian eccentricity, determination, and creativity. It was during this period of preservation that the Big Banana officially entered the phase of its history, where it stopped just being a monument and started becoming a living, breathing part of Coffs Harbour's tourism infrastructure. As new attractions, like the Coffs Harbour Marina and new coastal developments, began to draw more visitors to the area, the Big Banana stood as a friendly, welcoming reminder of the past, when simple roadside attractions were the highlight of a family road trip. And as the years passed, with its enormous fruit-shaped exterior and expanded attractions, the Big Banana found itself in a unique position. It had successfully adapted to the demands of a new generation of visitors without losing the charm and authenticity that had made it such an iconic landmark in the first place. Yet, with all its success and reinvention, the question remains: why did it all happen in the first place? Why did John Landy, a modest banana farmer, go to such great lengths to create something as absurd as a giant banana? The answer, as it turns out, is simpler than you might think. He just wanted to give people a reason to smile. And in the end, that's exactly what he did. As we move into the next phase of the Big Banana's journey, it's important to pause and consider the broader cultural significance of such a strange and delightful landmark. After all, it's not every day that a giant fruit becomes a central figure in a region's tourism and local identity. And yet, the Big Banana wasn't just about being big, it was about embodying a kind of optimistic spirit that runs through many of Australia's larger-than-life attractions. From the Big Merino to the Big Pineapple, these oversized sculptures served as symbols of community pride, economic ambition, and quirky Australian humor. It wasn't just a banana. It was a statement. A statement about the small-town spirit that thrives in the face of globalization. The idea of having a giant immovable object in the middle of nowhere reflects an intrinsic need to mark a place, to say, this is ours, even as the world around it changes. This desire to create something unique isn't just a modern phenomenon. It's tied to Australia's history and its efforts to carve out its identity in the world. Well, while the country itself might not have the centuries-old landmarks of Europe or Asia, what it does have are stories, and stories tend to come in strange, unexpected shapes. The Big Banana, for all its humor, represents something deeply human, a yearning to be seen, to leave a mark, and to create a piece of culture that future generations can look back on and say, this is where we came from. At its core, the Big Banana embodies an enduring Australian tradition, embracing the odd and the whimsical. There's a light-heartedness to these larger-than-life monuments, and in an ever more polished digital world, that sense of fun and authenticity is increasingly precious. It's a reminder that sometimes the best way to preserve history is to make it fun, by transforming it into a giant, welcoming and slightly ridiculous icon that attracts people from all walks of life. But while the Big Banana certainly embodied this quirky spirit, it also reflected a deeper historical truth about rural Australia's economic dependence on agriculture. The Big Banana's transformation into a tourist attraction wasn't purely about eccentricity, it was also about survival. The 1980s and 1990s had not been easy for Australian banana farmers. The rise of supermarket chains, global trade, and increased competition from overseas producers meant that banana prices were often undercut, and local farmers were squeezed. In this context, the Big Banana's focus on tourism was not only a way to celebrate the agricultural industry, it was a lifeline. Tourism provided an avenue for the region to diversify its economy and find new revenue streams. This strategy of economic diversification through cultural attractions wasn't unique to Coffs Harbour. It was a model many rural communities in Australia began to embrace. As the region's agriculture began to face growing challenges, the Big Banana provided a tangible connection to the land and its farming roots. By building this iconic structure, John Landy wasn't just promoting bananas, he was promoting the entire region's agricultural identity. Visitors came to the Big Banana to understand more about bananas, but they also came to experience the local lifestyle, to interact with the people who had been growing these fruits for generations. Yet, the challenges weren't over. In the 2000s, as the world economy continued to shift and more people became environmentally conscious, the Big Banana had to contend with new pressures. Questions about sustainability and ecological responsibility began to influence the tourist industry. Visitors wanted to see attractions that weren't just fun, but responsible. As a result, the Big Banana and its surrounding park had to adapt once again. In this new era, sustainability became a priority for the attraction's management. Recycling programs, water conservation initiatives, and energy-efficient upgrades were introduced. The goal was to preserve the Big Banana's place as a key tourist attraction, while ensuring that the site didn't harm the environment it had originally been created to celebrate. By embracing green practices, the Big Banana's owners acknowledged the changing times while staying true to their roots. Even as the world of tourism evolved, they wanted the Big Banana to remain a responsible symbol of the local community, not just a monument to the past. What's fascinating is how the Big Banana managed to evolve without losing its inherent charm. The banana might have been reimagined and renovated, but its identity, the personality of that big yellow fruit, never changed. It still welcomed visitors with open arms, still invited people to smile, still made families pause and think about the humble banana's place in Australia's agricultural history. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the Big Banana's evolution is how it became not just a tourist attraction, but a cherished piece of national history. The story of its creation, this monumental yellow fruit, became part of the broader narrative of what it means to be Australian. It reflected a desire for fun, community, and identity. It was a piece of cultural history, wrapped in a bright, cheerful exterior, just waiting to be discovered. And in the end, that's what made the Big Banana so enduring. It wasn't just a giant sculpture or a piece of advertising. It was a reflection of the Australian spirit, a symbol of a country that embraces its oddities, celebrates its agriculture, and continues to carve out a place in the world for something uniquely its own. The Big Banana had become far more than a roadside attraction. It was a reminder that even in a fast-paced world, there's always room for a little bit of fun, a bit of nostalgia, and a giant banana. As the years wore on, the Big Banana continued to solidify its place in both the hearts of the locals and the minds of visitors. The spirit of innovation, always present in its evolution, was never quite satisfied with simply maintaining the status quo. With every new addition to the attraction, the community watched in awe as it transformed from a quirky roadside oddity into a bustling tourist complex that brought not only business, but also pride to the region. The early 2010s saw another significant transformation for the Big Banana. This time, it wasn't just about expanding the park or adding more attractions. It was about creating a sense of cohesion between the structure and its surrounding environment. The focus shifted to integrating the Big Banana into the local landscape, ensuring that the attraction didn't feel out of place in the natural beauty of Coffs Harbour. It was time to respect the region's resources, its beauty, and its agricultural roots in a way that was both responsible and forward-thinking. One of the most notable additions during this time was the inclusion of sustainable farming practices within the Big Banana's operations. The attraction began to focus not only on bananas, but also on educating visitors about the importance of sustainable agriculture. An on-site farm-to-table cafe was launched, where visitors could enjoy fresh, locally grown food and learn about how these sustainable practices were making a real difference in the agricultural industry. It became clear that the Big Banana wasn't just a monument to bananas, it was also a living example of how farming and tourism could coalesce in a meaningful and environmentally conscious way. As the attraction grew, so did its educational component. Meanwhile, in 2015, the Big Banana introduced a new exhibit focusing on the broader agricultural history of the Coffs Harbour region. This wasn't just a history lesson. It was an interactive, multi-sensory experience that immersed visitors in the world of local farming. Guests could learn about different crops, the evolution of farming technology, and even participate in hands-on activities that simulated the agricultural process. The Big Banana became a gateway for tourists, not only to understand the importance of bananas, but to appreciate the vital role agriculture plays in the region's economy. But even with all these changes and educational initiatives, the Big Banana never lost its sense of fun. The beloved giant fruit remained the centerpiece of the park, a bright and joyful symbol of the region. While other parts of the attraction became more focused on education and sustainability, the banana itself remained a touchstone of pure enjoyment. Whether it was kids racing down the water slides, families enjoying the banana-themed cafe, or tourists snapping photos in front of the iconic fruit, the Big Banana continued to bring smiles to all who visited. This delicate balance between fun, education, and sustainability became the hallmark of the Big Banana's brand. It wasn't simply a place where people could get their picture taken next to a giant fruit. It was a space where people could connect with the land and its history in a meaningful way, all while enjoying a day out with family and friends. The key to its success wasn't just about being quirky or nostalgic. It was about creating an experience that offered something for everyone. But what truly set the Big Banana apart in this new era of tourism was the sense of community involvement that permeated every aspect of the attraction. In a world where many large-scale tourist destinations are owned by big corporations, the Big Banana's roots in the local community were undeniable. Local farmers, artisans, and business owners became an integral part of the Big Banana's operations. There was a sense that the attraction wasn't just owned by a business, it belonged to the people of Coffs Harbour. For instance, the Big Banana's farm-to-table cafe didn't just rely on outside suppliers. It sourced much of its food from local farmers, including bananas grown right on the land surrounding the attraction. This close connection between the attraction and the land made the Big Banana a source of pride for the community. It wasn't just a tourist spot. It was a place where locals could work, collaborate, and share in the success of a growing industry. This focus on community and sustainability didn't go unnoticed. As the Big Banana gained more national and even international attention, it was celebrated as a model for how a local landmark could evolve and thrive while staying true to its roots. The attraction demonstrated that even a quirky roadside monument could have lasting cultural and economic value if it was willing to adapt to changing times and embrace new ideas. But even with all its success and accolades, there were moments when the future of the Big Banana seemed uncertain. The pressures of modernization, environmental concerns, and evolving tourist demands created a constant need for reinvention. Yet, despite these challenges, the Big Banana managed to maintain its unique character and significance. It had become a symbol of resilience, a reminder that even in the face of constant change, the spirit of creativity, community, and fun could endure. One of the most touching stories to emerge from the Big Banana's modern history occurred in 2018, when the local community came together to fund a restoration project for the iconic banana. This wasn't just about maintaining the structure, it was about preserving a beloved piece of their collective identity. The effort was spearheaded by a group of locals who felt that the Big Banana represented more than just a tourist attraction. It was part of their personal history, a part of the fabric of Coffs Harbour. This community-driven initiative not only helped ensure the banana's continued existence, but it also underscored the deep emotional connection that the people of Coffs Harbour had with their giant fruit. It wasn't just a commercial success, it was a part of their story, something they could point to with pride as a symbol of their town's resilience and creativity. The story of the Big Banana is a testament to the power of embracing the odd, the whimsical, and the unexpected. It shows that even the most peculiar ideas can have lasting cultural significance. And in an ever-changing world, the Big Banana has remained a beacon of community spirit, innovation, and nostalgia, a reminder that sometimes the most enduring legacies come in the most unusual packages. If you've ever wondered how a concrete banana in a coastal Australian town managed to stay relevant for over half a century, the answer lies in its unique ability to evolve while remaining charmingly consistent. As you stroll through the grounds of the Big Banana Fun Park today, or rather, as I walk you there in your imagination, you'll notice it's not just a monument anymore. It's a breathing, bustling little ecosystem of nostalgia, soft serve, and unapologetic whimsy. But even the quirkiest roadside attraction can't survive without some careful orchestration behind the scenes. By the 2020s, the Big Banana had entered its 6th decade of operation. And like anyone approaching their 60th birthday, it needed a bit of pampering, some cosmetic updates, and perhaps a spa day or two. That's how the most recent wave of renovations began. This wasn't about changing the banana's essential character. It was about keeping the magic alive, making sure its bright yellow facade didn't turn into a pale memory of the past. One of the more subtle but significant upgrades involved lighting. A new energy-efficient LED system was installed to ensure the banana could be admired in all its golden glory, both day and night. Now, at dusk, the banana gently glows like a peeled crescent moon lying on its side. It's silly, yes, but also oddly beautiful. Something almost sacred about its luminous presence, a beacon for families, selfie seekers, and weary travelers alike. Around this time, the fun park itself expanded its offerings to keep pace with changing tastes. Tourists had grown more experience-driven. People didn't just want a photo. They wanted stories to tell, preferably ones involving snow tubing, laser tag, or oddly competitive banana-themed mini-golf. And the park delivered. New rides and updated attractions brought in younger audiences, while the original banana exhibit, the historical one, got a respectful polish and a few interactive elements. There's now a modest but earnest banana museum inside the complex. It's filled with memorabilia, old photos, hand-painted signage, and curious relics from the banana industry's heyday. There are stories of migrant workers, families who have grown bananas for generations, and oddball facts like how banana peels were once used to polish shoes. If you're the kind of person who likes their trivia with a side of nostalgia, it's a quiet little treasure trove. But the park's strength continued to be its connection to the land and its community. You see, many attractions fade because they become detached from the people who once loved them. But the Big Banana managed to avoid that fate by remaining a constant presence in the lives of locals. Kids, who once slid down the banana in the 1980s, now bring their own children to do the same. School excursions, family holidays, retirement bus tours, all of them still pass through its grounds. Even in the age of TikTok and hyper-short attention spans, the big banana somehow continues to enchant. Part of that is thanks to its Instagrammable absurdity, sure, but more importantly, it offers an unpretentious kind of joy. It doesn't try to be more than what it is. It's a giant banana on a hill. And in a world that often feels chaotic and overwhelming, there's comfort in something that stayed so delightfully odd for so long. Of course, things weren't always smooth behind the scenes. Like any legacy attraction, the Big Banana has faced its share of bureaucratic hurdles, funding issues, and management changes. There were debates about development permits, signage rules, and even a proposal to build a hotel adjacent to the site. That one got scrapped. Thankfully, after a local campaign to keep the banana solo, they didn't want to lose the surreal charm of seeing a lone banana rise from the hillside, unbothered by commercial clutter. Then came 2020, and with it, a global pandemic that temporarily paused tourism across the world. The Big Banana, like so many destinations, had to shut its gates. The giant fruit stood silent for weeks, baking under the New South Wales sun, while playgrounds sat eerily still, and the soft-serve machines gathered dust. It was a strange time, one where even the most joyful landmarks couldn't pretend things were normal. But the community rallied. Locals supported the site through online gift shop purchases, virtual tours, and even nostalgic social media campaigns, encouraging visitors to share their banana memories. Staff members spoke about what it meant to work at the attraction, some for over 20 years. There were teary videos, heartfelt messages, and a quiet realization that the Big Banana wasn't just a quirky photo op. It was a keeper of stories, a local institution, a slice of identity in fiberglass yellow. By the time the gates reopened, it felt less like a business returning, and more like a beloved friend recovering from a nap. New safety protocols were put in place, but the essence remained. Families returned, cameras clicked, and banana bread sales soared. In recent years, the Big Banana has also embraced a digital presence. It now has a surprisingly charming YouTube channel, featuring behind-the-scenes tours, banana cooking tips, and history bites narrated by staff with cheerful Aussie accents. They're not flashy videos, but they're soothing, informative, and just weird enough to be delightful. A perfect fit, really. Novelty. There's also been discussion of installing a banana time capsule, a project aimed at preserving community memories for future generations. Locals have contributed handwritten notes, family recipes, and even pieces of banana-themed art. The capsule is set to be sealed beneath the fun park's main concourse sometime next year, with plans to reopen it in 2072, on the banana's 100th birthday. So here we are, drifting through decades of banana-flavored history, all from a single structure built in 1964, with chicken wire and concrete. It's a reminder that not all monuments are marble or made to honor war heroes. Some are built to sell fruit. And sometimes, that's enough. Because in the end, the Big Banana isn't trying to be serious. It doesn't need to be. It just needs to be big and yellow and there, exactly where you expect it, every time you pass that stretch of highway in Coffs Harbour. Constant, bright and mildly ridiculous. And honestly, isn't that a kind of greatness too? Let's slow our steps now and wander into a quieter corner of this tale. The world beyond the banana. Because, although the Big Banana became the star attraction, it didn't exist in a vacuum. It had friends, rivals, and curious copycats. Over the decades, as Australians across the country saw what a giant banana could do for a local economy, a peculiar phenomenon took root: big things. You may have heard of them: the Big Merino, the Big Lobster, the Big Pineapple. These oversized icons began sprouting up along highways and sleepy towns throughout the continent, creating a sort of surreal breadcrumb trail across Australia. And while the Big Banana was the pioneer, it certainly wasn't the only one to leave its mark. Imagine, for a moment, driving through rural Queensland and spotting an enormous mango looming over the horizon, or pulling into a quiet South Australian town and being greeted by a sheep the size of a double-decker bus. These weren't accidents. They were deliberate, whimsical, and economically strategic. each one a proud exclamation point on the landscape shouting, "Hey, we're here, and we've got something worth stopping for." But it wasn't just about catching attention. These big things, over 150 of them at last count, formed their own kind of cultural quilt. They celebrated the industries, oddities, and community quirks that made each town unique. Bananas in Coffs Harbour, a prawn in Ballina, a koala, a beer can, a rolling pin, and not one of them was ever built with irony. These structures were earnest, and in a country that often pokes fun at itself, that sincerity is what made them oddly lovable. Back at the Big Banana, this growing movement of monumental kitsch brought both competition and camaraderie. On the one hand, more giant attractions meant more reasons for travelers to zigzag across the country, which helped build momentum for roadside tourism. On the other, each new big thing had to be big enough, weird enough, or charming enough to compete for attention. The Big Banana, for all its seniority, couldn't rest on its laurels. So, what did the Big Banana do to stay relevant? Well, for one, it embraced its role as the original. That became its brand. The first, the most iconic, the one that started it all. It began appearing in listicles, travel shows, and even quirky academic studies about Australiana. Scholars and cultural critics debated the meaning of big things. Were they art? Were they commerce? Were they modern totems? The Big Banana just kept smiling, oblivious, content to be itself. It also participated in national big thing festivals and collaborations. There were even discussions about creating a cross-country passport, where tourists could collect stamps from each big thing they visited. Sort of like a strange roadside pilgrimage. And of course, the Big Banana was always stamp number one. There's also something undeniably cozy about the community of people who love these structures. You find online forums full of big thing enthusiasts, sharing photos, memories, and travel tips. One woman recounted how her parents got engaged beneath the Big Banana in the 70s. Another couple celebrated their anniversary there every year, recreating their first road trip. A grandfather shared stories of bringing all 5 grandchildren there, one at a time, to have their picture taken with the smiling fruit. The banana became less of a gimmick and more of a generational marker. But we shouldn't forget the workers behind the scenes, those who maintained the attractions, guided the tours, scooped the ice cream, and managed the lines. Many of them became mini celebrities in their own right. Like Dave, the soft-serve machine operator who'd been there since the late 80s and claimed he could recognize returning tourists just by the way they held their cones. Or Margaret, the longtime cashier at the gift shop, who insisted that no one left without a free smile and a banana-shaped eraser. These people kept the magic alive not with concrete and steel, but with warmth, patience, and an uncanny ability to make kitsch feel like comfort. As the decades rolled on, the Big Banana watched generations pass by. It saw mullets come and go, school uniforms change, and entire fads rise and fall like waves on the Coffs Harbour beach. But through it all, it remained reliable, slightly absurd, and profoundly beloved. You might expect a structure like this to lose its shine, maybe become outdated or forgotten. But here's the thing. The Big Banana exists in a space beyond fashion. It's not meant to be cool. No, it's meant to be there. A landmark not just in geography, but in memory. And in that way, the Big Banana achieved something few attractions ever do. It transcended its original purpose. It stopped being just a gimmick to sell fruit and became a symbol of local pride, roadside oddity, and joyful absurdity. So, if you ever find yourself driving through New South Wales and you spot something bright and yellow glinting through the eucalyptus trees, don't just drive by. Pull over, stretch your legs, take a silly photo. Nay, eat some banana bread. And remember that sometimes the most enduring monuments are the ones that make us laugh. not gas. Because let's be honest, the world doesn't need another statue of a general on a horse. But it could always use another giant fruit with a gift shop inside. By now, the Big Banana had grown into a local legend, a national landmark, and a cultural icon. But fame, even the goofy family-friendly kind, isn't always simple to manage. The next stage in its curious journey was a balancing act, keeping the magic alive without letting it sour into mere novelty. And so the Big Banana began to do what all great entertainers must eventually do: evolve. But how exactly do you improve a massive, concrete banana? Well, you start by building around it. Literally. In the early 2000s, the Big Banana began adding more and more attractions to its grounds. No longer just a stop for banana bread and a cheeky photo, it started transforming into something far more ambitious: a full-fledged theme park. Mini golf popped up first, naturally banana-themed. Then came the toboggan ride, winding through the hills behind the fruit. Children would squeal with delight as they zipped downhill, the big yellow monument always watching from above like a fruity guardian angel. Next came the water park. Yes, a water park. Complete with slides, splash zones, and squeaky polystyrene tubes. Suddenly, the Big Banana wasn't just something you saw, it was something you experienced. You could spend an entire afternoon, even a whole day there, soaked and sunburned, and slightly dizzy from too many turns on the spinning teacups. Of course, the banana itself remained the star. It stood at the entrance like a mascot from a dream you only half remember, grinning with what could be described as both charm and mild indifference. You'd walk through its belly to enter the park, past displays of banana cultivation history, and emerge into a world where whimsy ruled. But beneath the silliness, there was strategy. Tourism in Australia was becoming more competitive, and families had more options. International travel was opening up. And so, like any clever institution, the Big Banana kept layering new experiences atop the original charm. Workshops were added. Kids could learn how bananas grow, how they ripen, and how to properly hold a ukulele-sized version for a social media photo op. There were chocolate dipping stations, mascot parades, and even a small banana museum, lovingly curated with everything from vintage fruit stickers to antique slicers. It was history told with a wink. There was even, at one point, a suggestion to start a banana university with novelty diplomas in peelology and slippery studies. That plan may not have fully ripened, but the ambition was clear: keep people coming back, not just once, but year after year. And the Big Banana found its rhythm in that. It became a sort of annual tradition for many families along the East Coast, a place parents could bring their children, just as they had once been brought themselves. You'd hear the same conversations, repeated every summer in the car park. Didn't they have a slide over there last year? Me one side? I'm cow today. I swear, the banana looks shinier this time. Remember when your dad dropped his camera in the fountain? Generations passed beneath its curved yellow shadow, and with each passing year, the attraction grew, not just physically, but emotionally. It started appearing in wedding proposals, in short films, in local advertising jingles that never quite left your head. It even inspired novelty songs, some of which you can still find on obscure corners of YouTube, sung by ukulele bands in questionable harmony. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, the staff at the Big Banana knew they had something rare on their hands. A living piece of nostalgia. Maybe mom, too. They treated the banana with care, giving it periodic touch-ups, structural assessments, and more than a few fresh coats of paint. It wasn't just a prop anymore. It was infrastructure. Infrastructure with feelings. If you asked some of the longtime workers, not everything was smooth sailing. There were occasional concerns about funding, debates about modernizing too much, and even a rogue suggestion or two to redesign it with a more realistic banana texture. Thankfully, those ideas were quietly shelved. Realistic bananas, after all, tend to turn brown and sad. What made the big banana special wasn't its realism. It was the opposite. Its embrace of cheerful absurdity. Its unashamed celebration of something so simple, it almost seemed profound. And this spirit began attracting visitors from farther afield. International tourists, many of whom had read about the big banana in guidebooks or travel blogs, began showing up to see what all the fuss was about. Germans. It. Japanese. Diet. Canadians. Backpackers. Honeymooners. And retirees. They came. They smiled. Wondered. They took pictures pretending to hold it, like a telephone. Some were bewildered. Others were delighted. But all agreed on one thing. It was unlike anything else they'd seen. Because where else in the world could you walk through a 30-meter banana, buy banana jam made by a third-generation jam maker, then get splashed by your cousin while sliding out of a giant inflatable banana boat? It's easy to dismiss these things as kitsch, or quaint, or silly. But kitsch done well has power. It sticks in your memory. It softens your heart. And in a world increasingly focused on sleekness and speed, there's comfort in something so big, so bright, and so proudly ridiculous. By evolving with the times, but never losing its identity, the big banana pulled off a rare feat, staying fun without becoming cynical. It managed to be family-friendly without being boring, nostalgic without being outdated. And maybe that's the real secret to its staying power, not the concrete or the banana bread, but the way it reminds people of who they were when they first saw it. A little smaller, a little sillier, and full of wonder. Dear starcher. If you ever find yourself in Coffs Harbour, and you take a stroll just before sunset, you might notice something curious happening around the big banana. The golden light catches the paint in a particularly flattering way, casting long shadows over the surrounding parkland. It glows, ever so slightly, as though the banana is basking in the knowledge of its own absurd fame. By now, the big banana had become more than a roadside attraction. It was woven into Australia's national identity in that strange, delightful category of things that don't make sense but feel right. Alongside Vegemite sandwiches and kangaroo road signs, there stood the big banana, proud, unbothered, and utterly irreplaceable. Its success had a ripple effect. Across the country, more big things emerged. There was the big pineapple in Queensland, the big lobster in South Australia, and even a big boxing crocodile up in the Northern Territory. A sort of gentle arms race of absurdity unfolded, each town trying to outdo the next with increasingly elaborate fiberglass monuments. And yet, none quite matched the big banana's charm. Why? Because the big banana wasn't just a gimmick thrown together for laughs. It was born of a genuine attempt to survive. A man trying to save his banana farm? A region trying to find its voice on the map. There was heart baked into its concrete curves. But even icons must face change, and as the 2010s and 2020s rolled in, so too did the digital age. Where once roadside billboards were enough, now the big banana had to reckon with algorithms, hashtags, and TikTok teams. Suddenly, everything was about shareability. A picture of a banana wasn't enough. It needed a dance challenge, or a viral banana fact countdown, or someone dressed in a full banana suit doing push-ups beside it. And so, the big banana embraced its new role, not just a physical site, but a digital personality. Its staff, often local teens and uni students, began managing social media accounts. The banana had a Twitter presence, an Instagram filter. There were behind-the-scenes videos showing the maintenance crew giving it its yearly polish, or clips of kids gleefully devouring banana ice cream while squealing about the banana cave. It was, in a word, thriving. Even YouTube travel vloggers from the other side of the world began including it in their top 10 weirdest attractions lists. often with an affectionate smirk. The tone was always the same. I didn't expect much, but honestly, this place rules. Meanwhile, the community around the banana continued to benefit. Local artisans sold handmade banana earrings. Cafes offered banana pancakes with a proud AS seen near the Big Banana tagline. Schools took field trips there. Seniors held walking tours. The banana had become both mascot and mentor. There were plans, some ambitious, others whimsical. One local artist proposed building a banana maze in the shape of a peel. Another wanted to light it up with synchronized LED displays. Someone even suggested floating a banana-shaped blimp above the city once a year, just for the spectacle. Not every idea took flight, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that the banana was no longer just a static landmark. It was alive in people's imaginations. Oh, somewhere along the way, the Big Banana also became a kind of emotional touchstone. It was where people returned after years abroad. Where travelers marked their cross-country road trips. Where children pointed and squealed and parents, tired from long drives, quietly smiled. It was oddly comforting. Like finding a familiar face in a crowded room. And in darker times, such as during bushfire seasons or pandemic lockdowns, the banana remained. Closed for safety, perhaps, but still standing, still smiling. Locals would drive by just to see it, to feel like things would one day be normal again. There's something reassuring about that. In a world that changes rapidly, where buildings are torn down and trends vanish overnight, the Big Banana remains an anchor. A little absurd. A little too yellow, but always there. It even began appearing in more serious academic circles. A few cultural studies programs included it in lectures on Australian identity and postmodern nostalgia. One lecturer, perhaps half-jokingly, described it as a sublime act of national whimsy. Another paper discussed its importance in post-colonial tourism. The Big Banana, it seemed, could be as deep or as silly as you needed it to be. And maybe that's the key to its lasting appeal. You could treat it as a joke, and that was fine. You could treat it as an icon, and that worked too. Or you could simply see it as it was. A great big yellow banana, made of steel and concrete, standing proudly on a hillside, offering joy to anyone willing to let their guard down. So people kept visiting, kept laughing, kept asking, wait, is that really it? And then, 5 minutes later, okay, that was actually kind of amazing. And the Big Banana kept on doing what it always had, welcoming them all, one silly grin at a time. There's something unshakably sincere about the Big Banana, isn't there? It knows it's ridiculous. It leans into that ridiculousness with grace. And yet, behind the fiberglass facade and the novelty fridge magnets, it reflects something tender about the human condition. Our endless attempts to mark our place in the world with joy, with creativity, and yes, with fruit. By the 2020s, the Big Banana had become a cultural mirror as much as a monument. If you listen closely to the conversations of tourists, ambling through its gift shop or licking banana-swirled gelato out on the lawn, you'd hear variations of the same themes. It's so weird, but I kind of love it. Or, I wasn't expecting to care, but I kind of do. Generations had now grown up with it. Grandparents brought their grandkids, pointing to old black and white photos where they stood in front of the banana in polyester bell-bottoms or awkward 90s windbreakers. Time had passed. Hairstyles had changed. But the banana remained, and somehow, it looked better with age. People often wonder why such things endure. Why a giant banana, of all things, gets preserved and praised while more serious landmarks vanish without fanfare. Maybe it's because seriousness is overvalued. The world is already heavy with solemn monuments. What we secretly long for are places that don't take themselves too seriously, that invite play and imagination. The big banana doesn't lecture, it grins. And yet, not all was rosy forever. The big banana did face threats. Every so often, rumors would flare up, developers wanting to modernize the area, or local council debates over maintenance budgets. One particularly anxious year, a crack appeared along the lower curve, sparking whispers of instability and closure. The public response was swift. Locals wrote letters. Tourists signed online petitions. Well, a high school student started a Save Our Banana social media campaign, which quickly trended. Retired engineers volunteered to help assess the damage. Even nearby towns, with their own big things, offered technical advice. In the end, the banana was repaired, reinforced with fresh steel bracing, and lovingly repainted in its signature yellow. The crisis, minor though it was, cemented something. The big banana wasn't just an attraction. It was a community symbol, not just of Coffs Harbour, but of Australian quirk and tenacity. And behind the scenes, the family legacy lived on. While the original builder had long since passed, his descendants stayed connected. A grandson, now in his 40s, helped oversee park operations. A niece managed the marketing side. Interviews with them revealed a kind of stunned humility. We had no idea it would go this far. One of them confessed with a chuckle. It was a banana. It was supposed to be a gimmick. But the thing about gimmicks is that they can become lore. The banana had crept into school curriculums, tourism guides, late-night comedy shows, and even international headlines. Once, during a light-hearted news segment in the UK, a TV anchor referred to it as Australia's true capital of joy. There was even a small but devoted group of fans who called themselves Banana Pilgrims. They kept a blog tracking their visits to every big thing across the country, always starting and returning to the big banana. They recorded banana-themed poems, shared homemade banana bread recipes, and even hosted a yearly trivia night via live stream, where questions ranged from, what year did the toboggan ride open, to, which US state has a banana statue smaller than ours? Their motto? Fruit forward, always. All the while, kids continued to slide down the toboggan hill. Couples took awkward selfies under the arch. No. A new display was added in 2024, a small banana history museum, complete with vintage farming tools, faded photographs, and a lovingly detailed model of the original 1960s banana plantation. For many visitors, it was their first glimpse into the true origins of the banana. Not just the fruit, but the people who grew it. Migrant workers, sunburnt growers, machinists who rigged the toboggan, artists who painted on wet days with wind blowing in their faces. There was dignity in those stories. Quiet, understated, and easy to miss if you were just in it for the novelty hat. But for those who lingered, who read the captions and paused at the display case, holding the original architectural sketch, it hit home. This wasn't just roadside kitsch. This was memory. And memory, once shared, becomes legacy. The banana had done its part. It had brought people together, reminded them that joy doesn't need grandeur, that legacy doesn't need marble. It could be built from mesh wire and chicken wire, and good old-fashioned stubbornness. And through it all, there was a lesson as smooth and sweet as a ripe Cavendish. Silliness is a kind of resilience. It keeps us going. Novelty makes us softer, more open, helps us laugh, even when things feel uncertain. So if you ever find yourself there, in the warm Coffs Harbour breeze, watching the sun cast gold across that massive yellow curve, take a moment. Snap a photo if you must. New. But also, just look. Let yourself feel the harmless absurdity of it all. And smile. And because somewhere between its steel ribs and fruity charm, the big banana carries something a little timeless. And it's waiting for you to visit. There's a curious side effect to creating something as iconic, and unorthodox. As the big banana, it becomes more than its parts. It takes on a life of its own, growing far beyond its original intent. In the case of the big banana, that growth included a surprising amount of academic attention. Yes, actual researchers at real universities. In the early 2030s, a quiet ripple began moving through Australian cultural studies departments. Professors and PhD students, long intrigued by roadside attractions, began devoting entire research papers to the banana phenomenon. Titles like Bananas and Belonging, Placemaking through Australiana Monuments, and Fruitful Absurdity. The big banana as postmodern pastoral started cropping up in obscure academic journals. One particularly passionate cultural geographer even published a book, Peel Me Another One, The Big Banana and the Nostalgia Economy. It made modest sales, mostly in university libraries and the Coffs Harbour Visitor Centre gift shop, but earned a glowing review in The Guardian, where the critic described it as a warm, scholarly hug in book form. The big banana, you see, had become a touchstone in a wider conversation about how Australians remember their past, not through solemn statues or grim memorials, but through bananas, fish, and sheep, the size of buses. It made people think, softly and slowly, about what kind of country builds a banana and then keeps it standing for decades. The scholarly lens was just one layer, though. Down on the ground, the banana kept doing what it always did, delighting school groups, attracting couples on awkward first dates, and luring road-weary drivers in for one last coffee before hitting the highway again. Somewhere around 2035, the team at the Big Banana leaned into its quiet fame in a new way. They partnered with a local audio company to record a series of bedtime stories set entirely at the attraction. The voiceover, a warm, slow Australian accent, narrating tales like the secret life of the banana mascot and night at the gelato counter. They became an unexpected hit among insomniacs, shift workers, and homesick expats. It turned out that the gentle absurdity of the big banana made for excellent sleep listening. Dog. Who knew? Meanwhile, in the broader landscape of Australia's big things, a kind of friendly rivalry continued. The Big Pineapple hosted music festivals. The Big Merino doubled down on educational sheep shearing demo estate, and then there was the Great Big Prawn in Ballina, which, according to certain feisty commenters online, was clearly better lit than the banana and more anatomically accurate. But the Big Banana fans held firm. Their mascot might not be realistic. It didn't shimmer like seafood or have shaggy wool, but it had something more: longevity, layers, and a whole ecosystem of memories attached. By the late 2030s, something rather touching happened. A few elderly residents of Coffs Harbour, who had been there since the very beginning, began holding annual Banana Remembrance Day picnics in the park. The event wasn't sad. It was a celebration. People brought old photos, shared stories about slipping on banana peels, real and metaphorical, and read aloud the very first newspaper article announcing the structure's opening in 1964. One woman, now in her 90s, stood up during the 2038 event and said, "I had my first kiss in the car park, right under the shadow of that banana. We've been married 70 years. The crowd erupted into applause, laughter, and a few misty eyes. These moments gave the banana something no rival big thing could ever quite replicate. Lived history. Not just national pride or artistic curiosity, but deeply personal tales. The Big Banana had witnessed proposals, family reunions, birthday picnics, nervous teenage dates, and countless quiet pauses for breath after long drives. And all without saying a word." That year, a motion was quietly passed by the local council. The Big Banana was to be granted formal heritage status. This meant protections against demolition or major alteration, and a modest boost in preservation funding. The team behind the attraction celebrated with banana-shaped cupcakes and a commemorative tote bag that read, "Heritage Fruit, Est, 1964. If a concrete banana could feel emotions, you imagine it would have beamed. As we wind down our journey, it's worth noting how the Big Banana never demanded respect. It earned it, over years of quiet service, good-natured silliness, and a stubborn refusal to disappear. It welcomed everyone, from bemused backpackers to overexcited toddlers, and never asked anything more than a few dollars and a smile. It didn't try to be high art. It didn't try to be educational. And yet, in a world obsessed with meaning, it offered something rare, joy without strings, nostalgia without cynicism, a monument to nothing in particular, and everything that matters. Even now, people still pull over. They take the exit. They buy the ice cream. I would yell. They chuckle at the giant fruit, and for just a moment, they forget whatever it was they were rushing toward. Which, let's be honest, might be the real miracle. So, next time you see a photo of the big banana, whether in a travel brochure or on some ironic coffee mug, don't laugh it off too quickly. Or rather, do laugh. But let that laughter be warm, affectionate, and just a little odd. Because somewhere in that smiling fruit, there's a whole country's heart. And if you listen closely enough, you can almost hear it whisper, "You made it. Now, have a banana." As the sun lowers itself behind the ridgelines of Coffs Harbour, and the concrete banana casts a long shadow over the lush hillside, we arrive gently at the final chapter of this unexpectedly tender tale. Because even something as cheerfully absurd as a giant fruit has an ending, or rather, a slow tapering into legend. By the 2040s, the big banana had become more than just a roadside landmark. It was woven into the fabric of generational memory. Grandparents who once ran shrieking through the original toboggan track now returned with grandkids in tow, walking slower, laughing softer, but still beaming with the same wide-eyed delight. Some parts of the site had evolved, of course. The visitor center now had a modest VR experience where you could become the banana, complete with slow-motion fruit-peeling animations and an oddly satisfying banana suit simulator. TikTok teens visited ironically, but left with pockets full of keychains. New documentaries were made, narrated by thoughtful voices that began with, "You may think it's just a banana, but..." There was a time, long ago, when Australia's big things were seen as kitschy outliers. Unserious. But, by now, they were protected symbols, emblems of whimsy, in a fast, flattened world. And the banana was their gentle monarch. School curricula started including short units on 20th century Australian vernacular architecture, which, thanks to one ambitious teacher from Dubbo, included an entire week on fruit-based monuments. One of the students asked, during a classroom debate, whether the big banana counted as brutalist or pop art. The teacher paused, thought for a moment, and replied, "Ah yes." Back in Coffs Harbour, the caretakers of the banana took their job more seriously than ever. The banana's paint was now a special eco-formulation resistant to heat and sea air. Climate-resilient landscaping was added around the base. And just for fun, someone proposed an annual banana bonnet parade featuring pets in fruit-themed costumes. It was wildly popular. Manu, you sue, and melt and seeded. And down down. But while the banana remained firmly rooted in place, the idea of it began to float into more imaginative corners of Australian life. In literature, it appeared as a dreamlike backdrop in coming-of-age novels and magical realism stories, where bananas whispered secrets to those who truly listened. In indie video games, it was a level, a safe place where players could rest before their next challenge. And in lullabies, some parents began to sing their toddlers to sleep with verses about the friendly banana who watched the stars at night. In fact, you could argue that the banana had become Australia's unofficial dreamtime mascot, a figure not of ancient myth, but of something just as sacred, the shared silliness of a culture that doesn't take itself too seriously. And that may be its most enduring contribution. Not the gift shop trinkets, or the old photos fading in glove boxes, or even the heritage plaques, but the feeling that, in the midst of a noisy world, someone, somewhere, decided to build something gigantic and ridiculous, just because they could, just because it made people smile, And in doing so, they gave Australia a kind of bedtime story of its own. So if you ever find yourself driving the coastal highway at dusk, eyes weary, thoughts wandering, and you see the soft yellow curve of the big banana rising ahead, pull over. Not just for the snacks or the novelty selfie. Yea, but for the reminder that joy can be large, literal, and lovingly maintained. Sit for a while under its curve. Listen to the soft breeze through the banana trees. Watch the tourists murmur and point. Let your breathing slow. Let the day roll off your shoulders. Because what we've learned tonight, dear listener, is that even in concrete and fiberglass, even in a 13-meter-long fruit painted slightly too bright, there can be something lasting, something that endures. And that maybe, just maybe, the world doesn't need more symbols of power or pain. It needs more bananas. Aye.